Welcome to our May Lunch and Learn offering. Hope that today finds you well. We hope that this particular session will be informative to you in light of this being 2024. And we will begin rather than in a more formal structured prayer. I want to share with you a reflection that the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops produced a few years ago regarding Catholic Social Teaching 101 and rights and responsibilities.
Our human rights come out of human dignity. We're made in the image and likeness of God. That's where the dignity of the human person comes from. We all have a right to have a decent livelihood, but at the same time we have a responsibility to contribute to society, to the common good.
The basic human rights in Catholic social teaching are most succinctly expressed in the papal encyclical Pacem in Terris. And there, the foundation is the basic right to life that cannot be taken away.
We require life in order to have all of our other rights and in order to fulfill all our other responsibilities. We are required to have more than existence. Jesus promises us the abundant life.
Building on that basic right are all the super basic things that each of us need, like food and water and shelter and clothing.
Healthcare is another area where people have rights to medical procedures and medicine and the care of a doctor.
On top of the foundation of those sort of basic rights for survival, there are more sophisticated rights, like the right to participate in society.
A right to have a search for God in freedom of religion, to search for truth and to live in integrity with that, respected.
For us, rights and responsibilities are reciprocal. We always have a responsibility to others, to the common good, and to see our work and resources as something that need to be used to build up society and to be shared with those who are in need.
That need is a call. It calls something out from us. What do we encounter in the communities where we are? Our kids' school, our neighborhood, our parish. And then in a larger sense, what are the needs in our region?
Human beings are wonderful creatures that have rights, but also that have agency and responsibility to help to shape their own destiny and the destinies of others in ways that reflect this basic dignity that God has given us. So advocacy is a really important way for us as Catholics to participate in the ordering of society. It's a way for us to ask the government to structure laws, procedures, policies in such a way that people are better able to attain their human rights and exercise their responsibilities.
We are born with others given to us to look after us, but then with our responsibility to look after others. It's huge. We are really supposed to think when we meet others, and they're supposed to think when they meet us. Here is another person in God's image. Here is a person just like me.
The title of our session today is Achieving Justice Through Systemic Change, Navigating Faith in Politics. That's reference, tip of the hat to 2024, which is indeed an election year. Affecting change is never easy, so too systemic change in order to address injustice is a formidable task, made even more so when those affected have not found their collective voice. Juan Soto is the Executive Director of Pilsen Neighbors Community Council in Chicago. He's also the Treasurer for the Board of Directors for the National Catholic Council for Ministry. Juan has a BA in Business Marketing from the University of Illinois at Chicago and graduated in May of 2021 with a Master's of Arts in Pastoral Studies, as well as a certificate in Hispanic Theology and Ministry from Catholic Theological Union. We have invited him today because of his decades of experience training future leaders within the Gamaliel Organizers Guild, as well as his more recent leadership responsibilities within the National Catholic Council for Hispanic Ministry. Without further ado, Juan Soto.
Thank you. Thank you, Deacon. Good afternoon. It's an honor to share with you today. And thank you for the invitation, from Loxie Hopkins, Deacon Ferris, and those in the Diocese of Davenport. I am blessed to serve as the organizing director of the Gamaliel Network. And in September, I will have been in this ministry for the last 33 years. As Deacon Ferris says, I am the treasurer of NCCHM, but I'm also the treasurer of Instituto Fe y Vida as well. These are organizations consisting of national organizations serving in Hispanic Latin American ministry, religious communities, dioceses, parishes, pastoral institutes, and universities and lay people and pastoral agents in the United States. I want to begin our dialogue by sharing a little bit about the reality of migration ministry in the United States, and then connect that to the call of, faith and politics. We already know a lot about the history of migration in the United States. We know that the development of the United States has been marked by migration, and today where is a migratory and humanitarian crisis, not only at the border of the United States with Mexico, but through many cities in North America, including the state of Iowa. Currently, we see refugees and migrants from Central America, but especially those from Venezuela, are used by political parties as political garments to get media coverage to get votes. As an example, almost every week in the city of Chicago, where I live, buses of Venezuelan refugees arrive who, with deception and promises of help, of work, of a safe roof, boarded buses full of families, women, the elderly, young people, and children in the state of Texas to travel north to the northern cities. And they not only arrive in Chicago, but also in New York, in the island of Martha's Vineyard, where the rich vacation, and in Washington, the capital of the United States. There they are dropped off on the streets, but in bus terminals, on any street corner, and some even near the residence of the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. And they leave them on the streets in cold weather without coats or boots for snow or protection from the weather, increasing the suffering they already bring, not only from the conditions which force them to leave their country, but what they suffer on the way to the US-Mexico border. When they arrive in the United States, unfortunately, they are often greeted with a negative perception of migrants and refugees that prevents us from welcoming or meeting our vulnerable brothers and sisters, much less treating them with the dignity of being children of God. And this happens inside and outside the church. Misperceptions about the threat posed by foreigners to the political and economic security of our country. And even that crime increases with their arrival, often generate feelings of fear among local communities, which translates into fear of the other and fosters intolerant and hostile attitudes, attitudes of exclusion. To take away their freedom and dignity of being children of God, created in his image, simply because they were forced to leave their family and their country of origin. The church's social teaching regarding immigrants tells us that people have the right to migrate to maintain their lives and the lives of their families. But in the United States, migrants are often unwelcome, excluded, imprisoned, no matter their age. As we see the policy of separating families, children from their parents, to literally locking them in cages. Pope Francis, at the canonization of Bishop John Baptist Scalabrini and Armitage Zalet last October, he told us in his homily, I want to think about migrants. The exclusion of migrants is scandalous. The exclusion of migrants is criminal. It makes them die in front of us. And that is why we call the Mediterranean the largest cemetery in the world. The exclusion of migrants is disgusting, sinful, and it is criminal not to open up the doors to those who need it, because we exclude them and send them to prison camps, where they are exploited and sold as slaves. As the Holy Father asked the faithful present at the canonization Mass, do we welcome those who manage to get in as brothers and sisters, or do we exploit them? I leave that question there. The estimated number of international migrants has steadily increased over the last 50 years. The United States, in the country with the highest number of international migrants in the world, there are 51 million migrants across the according to the International Organization for Migration's 2022 report with that data from 2020. By 2020, some 25 million migrants from Latin America and the Caribbean were living in North America, a considerable increase from the estimated 10 million that was recorded in 1990. International migration is a complex phenomenon that affects a multiplicity of economic, political, social, and security issues around the world. This year alone, in 2024, out of the 196 international countries that exist globally, 50 are going to have presidential elections. On top of the issue platform in all of those countries, migration and global environment are in the top 3 issues for debate in those countries. The vast majority of people who migrate to other countries, as we all know, do so for some reasons related to work, family, or studies, and migratory process that, for the most part, are not sources of major problems, neither for migrants nor for the countries that they receive them. However, there are those who leave their homes and countries for a number of tragic reasons. For example, conflict, persecution, crime, violence, war, famine, or disasters. While these forcibly replace persons, such as refugees and internally displaced persons, represent a relatively small percentage of all migrants. They are often the most in need of assistance and support. Migration is nothing new. When we study the history of the church, we can see the human mobility that has always been a visible feature of Christianity. For the centuries, the Catholic Church has provided assistance and devoted special pastoral attention to people on the move. Today, we face the largest movement of displaced persons and refugees, unprecedented in recent history, especially with the war in Ukraine, which has created millions of refugees. We are called as a church to continue to develop in solidarity and synodality the mission of listening, walking and accompanying displaced people. In Pope John Paul II's document, Ecclesia in America, the Holy Father tells us, the American continent has known its history many immigration movements, which brought multitudes of men and women to the various regions in the hope of a better future. The phenomenon continues to date and specifically affects many individuals and families from Latin American nations of the continent who have settled in northern regions, in some cases constituting a considerable part of the population. They often carry with them a cultural and religious heritage, rich in significant Christian elements. The church is aware of the problems caused by the situation and strives to develop a true pastoral care among these immigrants in order to encourage their settlement in the territory and at the same time to arouse an attitude of acceptance on the part of the local populations, convinced the mutual openness will be an enrichment for all. That was from his statement number 65. The church aspires to work with the international community to promote and adopt effective measures to promote the dignity, rights, and freedoms of all persons in situations of human mobility, including forced migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, and displaced persons. How do we give pastoral care to migrants? One would answer as we would give to each other. Welcoming, protecting, and integrating and promoting. With these verbs, the Holy Father summoned up the Catholic Church's commitment to all those who live in existential peripheries, since it is not a question of letting social assistance programs fall from above, but of walking together a path through these four actions to build cities and countries while preserving their respective cultural and religious identities, to be open to differences and how to value them in the name of human fraternity. They are verbs that contain a call to encounter and action. In his address to the participants of the meeting of national leaders of pastoral care of migration, organized by the Council of European Bishops Conference in September 2017, Pope Francis said, "The Church's maternal love for these brothers and sisters asks to be concretely manifested in all phases of migratory experience, from departure to journey, from arrival to return, so that all the organs of the local churches along the route are protagonists of a single mission, each according to its own possibilities. Recognizing and serving the Lord in these members of his people on the way is a responsibility shared by all particular churches in the profusion of a constant, coordinated, and effective effort." The verb to welcome, says the Holy Father, translate into other verbs such as to expand the legal and safe means of entry, to provide adequate and dignified first accommodations, and to guarantee every migrant and refugee personal security and access to basic services. The Lord Jesus tells us that every opportunity to encounter the poor, the sick, the refugee, or the migrant is an opportunity to encounter himself. Matthew 25:35. And he tells us, happy are the merciful. His Spirit makes us capable of embracing everyone in order to create communion in diversity, harmonizing differences without ever imposing a uniformity that depersonalizes, and in his joy of encounter. Catholic communities are invited to grow and to recognize the new life that migrants bring with them. Do not forget hospitality. By it, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Hebrews 13:2. How should we welcome and receive migrants? The starting point is to recognize that we are fratelli tutti. We are all brothers and sisters. Empathy and solidarity with migrants and refugees must be promoted, starting from the parishes, so they may be recognized as brothers and sisters with equal dignity, that they may be co-protagonists in the construction of an ever greater we in society and the church. A national perspective and policy must be adopted that prioritizes the security and rights of all migrants, asylum seekers, refugees entering our territories, especially those fleeing armed conflicts, persecution, or violence. Policies must be established and supported with that favor alternatives to the detention of those who try to enter a country, recalling our mission to see Christ in each of our brothers and sisters in need, to proclaim and defend the dignity of every migrant, of every displaced person, and every refugee. In this way, the assistance given will not be seen as almsgiving of the goodness of our hearts, but as an act of justice owed to them. It is important to engage young people and young adults who tend to be more open-minded and have more positive perception of migrants and refugees to achieve a transformation of the migration narrative. And this comes from the guidelines on international migration ministry, migrants and refugees, the section on dicastery for promoting integral human development. Protect, promote human rights and dignity for all. The Holy Father tells us that the Catholic Church is called to build bridges between local communities and newcomers, promoting an authentic culture of encounter. Migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees must be welcome as human beings with the full respect of their dignity and human rights, regardless of their migration status. While each state has the right to manage and control its borders, migrants and refugees must be welcome in accordance with specific obligations under international law, including international human law and international refugee law. The more alternative and legal pathways that are open for migrants and refugees, the less likely they are to be exploited by criminal networks and become victims of human trafficking. The particular churches are called to open themselves precisely because of the gospel, to offer a better welcome to immigrants through pastoral initiatives of encounter and dialogue, but also by helping the faithful to overcome prejudice and suspicions. In Chicago, for example, we see refugees coming to parishes and communities seeking support, and through Catholic charities, community organizations offer them some form of shelter and food and support. But the Protestant churches have opened up new churches, welcoming them into their spiritual life. We must do better, and we can do better as a Catholic Church. As Catholics, we have to support and adopt measures that allow foreign residents to access justice regardless of their immigration status, allow them to denounce human rights violations and violence without fear, promote training and understanding of migration as an interconnected global phenomenon that generates opportunities for enriching encounters and cultural growth for all people. Migrants and refugees must be welcomed into families, and unaccompanied minors cared for while separated from their families. And the young people in families and parishes must be trained in caring for deeply wounded migrants and refugees, paying special attention to minors. He who welcomes a child like this in my name welcomes me. He who welcomes me does not welcome me, but him who sent me. We see this referenced in Mark 9:37, in Matthew 18:5, in Luke 9:48, and in John 13:20. Migrants should not only be seen as recipients of the church's aid, but also as active collaborators in her mission. It is important to promote the active participation of Catholic migrants in the life of local parishes and at the diocesan level, including them in mission, parish pastoral councils, financial councils, and other pastoral responsibilities. Migrants must be trained to recognize their own wealth as a valuable contribution to the life of the parishes and communities they arrive, offering their education, skills, and knowledge acquired in their countries of origin. A commitment to active leadership within a migrant community. For if God has given them the same gift as they have given us, because they believed in the Lord Jesus Christ, who was I to oppose God. Reference to Acts 11, verse 17. Our vocation as missionary disciples, baptized members of the church, is to promote and strengthen community and unity in diversity by following the example of Jesus. He is the shepherd who cares not only for those who normally consider themselves his sheep, but also for all humanity. The path of communion then becomes the path to universal fraternity. Migration can give rise to the possibility of new evangelization, for opening up spaces for the growth of a new humanity. Foretold in the Paschal ministry, a humanity for which every foreign land is a homeland, and every homeland is a foreign land. New pastoral structures must be promoted and created that responds compassionately and more effectively to the growing presence of migrants. intercultural parishes where pastoral programs aim to build a community enriched by diversity, and to prepare the local faithful for the encounter with migrants and refugees, to walk together as a synodal church where the churches of origin, those of their transit, those of welcome through the journey of migratory flows, intensify their cooperation for the benefit of those who leave a country, as well as for those who arrive, in any case, for those who need to encounter on their journey the merciful face of Christ in welcoming their neighbor. Seeing Christ as a foreigner, every Christian must know how to contemplate the face of Christ in the migrant. More than our neighbor, we see the face of Christ, who flees with his family to Egypt, assuming his conditions as migrants and making their experience of a pilgrim people his own. Matthew 2, verse 13. We as a council in Gamaliel and NCCHM, leaders and organizers see the need to train and accompany young people to raise their prophetic voices in the church and society, not only to resolve conflicts and demand restorative justice, which is extremely important, but to be leaders in the church and participate in the electoral and political system. And we do this by accompanying, integrating, and promoting young leaders in the United States who today represent 65% of the Catholics under the age of 35 to lead in and outside the church. We accompany and support them to grow as a culture of encounter in the midst of a world that is increasingly depersonalized by technology, and to grow in differences with accompaniment. Here's an example of how faith and politics intersect. Every 30 seconds, a young Latino or Latina turns 18 years of age in the United States. 90% of US citizens with the right to vote, that is about 66,000 new voters each month, and 800,000 each year, according to the organization Pew Research. The size of the Hispanic electorate doubled from 2000 to 2020, a growth of 93%, with a record 32 million eligible to vote. We represent 13.3% of all voters in the United States. Hispanic millennials will make up nearly half of the Hispanic vote, and together with the Gen Z generation, they offer a still untapped voter pool in the United States, and that is growing faster than any other ethnic group. It is also largely bilingual electorate with skills in the use of mobile technology. The reality is that the Latino vote already has the power to influence elections in every state of North America. And the vote not only empowers us, but puts us in the decision-making table, or at least our issues are heard in a different way because they need that vote. But while Hispanics eligible to vote in the United States have reached historic numbers, voter turnout has remained very, very low. For that reason, in 2020, the National Council for Hispanic Ministries and Gamaliel, along with 8 other national organizations, developed and launched a campaign we called Every 30 Seconds, where we invited and trained young Catholic citizens with the right to vote to register during the pandemic from their mobile phones or computers, and their parents were, and those that had parents that were eligible. Using the USCCB document, Forming Consciousness for Faithful Citizenship, a call for political responsibility for bishops, we created formation seminars with national leaders via Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, where young people from 28 states participated. We trained young Latinos on issues of promoting peace, the preferential option for the poor, and the economic justice and family and young people, promoting justice and countering violence, migration, combating discrimination, care for our common home, and global solidarity. And we also train young people to share on the issues of migrations and refugees with solid research-based explanations based against a false representation of themselves with compassion, and we take them to raise their prophetic voices to U.S. Congress to visit the offices of the senators. In April 2021, at the 6th National Congress of Hispanic Ministry Leadership in the United States, we went to the capital of the United States in Washington, D.C. Matter of fact, Quad Cities Interfaith and Escucha Mi Voz organizers and leaders participated along with Fuerzas Unidas from Gamaliel that engaged more than 400 Hispanic ministry leaders with 10 bishops, including Monsignor Cabrejos, Monsignor Lozano, Dr. Nguyen, and 2 Vatican secretaries. Dr. Emil Secuda and Dr. Rodrigo Guerra were also present. Dr. Cuda was the first Vatican secretary to participate in a press conference on the U.S. Capitol. Almost 100 of the participants are young people under the age of 35, and we prepared them together with Catholic Relief Services, Bread for the World, and Gamaliel to be spokespersons in favor of immigration reform and to ask legislators to call attention to the root causes of migrations. As a national organization, we walk, train, share, and accompany young people in collaboration with the National Catholic Network of Hispanic Ministries, an organization created by our council over 25 years ago and whose president, Adriana Vicioso, accompanied us in that ecclesial congress. There is no doubt that there is a great mistrust and the lack of formation for our Catholic communities that impacts the empathy and compassion necessary for an encounter and journey with migrants and refugees. But bearing in mind that every occasion, every encounter with foreigners, migrants, refugees, and the needy is a unique opportunity for an encounter with Jesus. You gave me food, you welcomed me, you took care of me. Citing Matthew 25. To welcome and support migrants and refugees is to put God's love into practice and to share in communion with Christ. We are called to understand migration and the guarantee to adequate space for mutual encounter where we accompany, train, and support them. We develop them as leaders to create a public life and to understand their own personal agency as community leaders and as community organizers. Young people should be invited and trained to become personally involved in programs aimed to add migrants and refugees with the sense of their civic call, their civic responsibility, and to actively get involved in civic engagement strategies. To foster empathy and compassion, to grow together in the culture of encounter and empowerment inside and outside the church to defend and advocate for the common good, to offer support of our brothers and sisters having fled violence, and they must be face new lifestyles and difficulties of integration, and to proclaim that Jesus is the source of relief and hope. Therefore, all pastoral workers must have a deep commitment to migrants in our church and society. All the laity are called to commit ourselves to the cause of migrants and to give witness of a Christian life, accompanying them in all their needs in the pilgrimage that they have to live. To conclude, I would like to return to the text of Matthew that invites us to see in each of us the presence of Christ when he tells us, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was passing through, and they lodged me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and they visited me, and they came to see me." Thank you for your time and for your listening. I, as a community organizer, when I first started a little over 33 years ago, my journey started actually when my parents decided to cross the border without papers when I was 5 years old. I don't see this type of work as a job. After doing this work, in the first 5 years, but after 10 years, I said to myself, this might be a career. But after 20 years, I see it as a vocation. But now, rounding it up, and thank you, Deacon, for now reminding me that this is decades. I see this as my ministry. Thank you, and may God continue to bless you.
Juan, I see a hand raised very quickly, and I'm going to give Loxy the opportunity to comment because it is by way of Loxy's recommendation that you are with us today. So I preempt even comments that I have. I defer to Loxy Hopkins.
Well, immigration reform has been an issue for me for over 20 years. My frustration is that both political parties seem to use this as vote catchers rather than be serious about this issue. So how do those of us in this meeting today gather together to push the issue on both political parties?
Is that a question for
That
me,
is a
Loxy?
question.
Okay.
What would you suggest? Yeah, that we do.
Well, in Gamaliel, our methodology is about understanding the other person's self-interest. I think the encounter, as in this terminology, is the one-on-one. We need to build relationships that go deeper than just a political party or even a bipartisan, attitude. I also have been blessed to work with a young man by the name of Jose Antonio Rosas, who has an academy. It's called La Academia de Líderes Católicos, which translates to the Academy of Catholic Leaders. And in that training, what he does, he says, he pushes not the political aspect of it, as we might seem to be Republican or even conservative or liberal or any spectrum there. He pushes the role of, what is your faith calling, and how do you profess your faith, right? So professionals professing their faith. And in much way, in much the similar way, Loxy, I would suggest that we need to build relationships, right? Too many times, it's the Bears against the Vikings kind of attitude.
Yeah.
I like this team better than I like the other team, but it's really a real reflection of what is your faith and values calling you to do in this work. And we have to be called to build relationships and to listen. Too many times we don't listen to the other. Too many times we just want to promote what others should, to convince you about what is important to me, but not listen to the other.
That reminds me of, oh, this has been many, many, many years ago. You did a group of us that some of us couldn't speak Spanish, some of us couldn't speak English, and we sat down together to do one-on-ones, which seemed like it would be impossible. But at the end, we were surprised how much we'd learned about each other.
Mhm.
And it showed us that language isn't the barrier, it's your mindset about the language that's a barrier. It just made me think maybe we could do more of those.
Yeah.
I'm going to take back the microphone for a moment from Loxy. But again, it was as a result of this creative means of thinking of who could speak prophetically in the moment. That is really the nature of Lunch and Learns for us. And again, it's Loxy on that core team and mindful of what we're going through and thinking of somebody who has taught and educated. The highest form of compliment, the highest expression of gratitude we here in the diocese can give you, Juan, is to reference somebody that we know and that you knew, that we all knew, Monsignor Marvin Modded.
Yes.
If he were on the call today, and I'm not saying that he isn't, he's just not connected by way of Zoom, he would thank you for the presentation and for the challenge to the laity and to the clergy. Your years of experience in organizing, clearly the deep dive that you've undertaken as far as the church teaching that so complements, and the experience and the additional education complement each other, provide for us insight as to the critical importance of encounter, the joy of encounter, and to do something that you've expressed that I've heard no one else do so quite as well, which is a vocation to train and accompany young people to become leaders in the church. Oftentimes, some of the efforts are seen as devoid or separate from what we truly believe as Catholics. Your expression of it is, again, insightful and as challenging as anything I've heard you express before. So for all of that, thank you. That's not a
Thank you.
question. That's just a compliment, a long-winded compliment.
Thank you.
What, a part of what Loxy talked about is, what is it that we are to do in this moment? And part of the reason for having you in is because many people engage on a Tuesday in November every 4 years, and then just kind of get back to the other things. What are ways that people in parishes can avail themselves of opportunities that are already in place so as to not have to recreate wheels?
Um, there are so many opportunities. Every day we are blessed by encountering others. I feel that at any moment is a teachable moment of encounter. Many times, we think about not all, but some may think about just categories, the young people, or even the migrants, or my family. I was in Rome for the consistory of or the elevation of the apostolic nuncio in the fall of last year, and we had meetings in the dicastery offices, and one of those offices around human integral development, they were like excited about meeting the delegation, and they say, it's the youth, it's the youth, the youth is our future, and really drawing back from that. So the director there must have asked the question about 4 times: is the youth the future? And everybody got excited. Well, yeah, the youth is the future, the youth is the future. But by the time the fourth question, it says, is the youth the future? I finally raised my hand and I said,
No,
no,
it's not.
no, it's now. I think the salvation or the growth of the church has to happen now. And it's irresponsible of us. And I said this, and I said it's irresponsible of us that we as adults have not figured out what to do now to just pawn it off on the next generation to figure it out. The young people, and I'll speak from personal experience, is, I have two daughters, both in college. And as much as we've sent them to Catholic elementary school and Catholic high school, actually, my youngest one is at SLU down in St. Louis, a Jesuit institution. She struggles with the church, right? But it's not the doctrine so much, is that there's no sense of believability
Hmm.
that comes to her.
Hmm.
Right? And because she took a trip down to the Mexican border a year ago and completely transformed,
Hmm.
it's like, for those that may have young people or children, when you send them off to college and then all of a sudden they come home after a semester or two, they kind of grow up, right? They mature, and they're like, all of a sudden it's like, who are you? What kind of person are you? Because now they started getting, so she went to this and she had a transformational moment. She goes, Dad, I always knew you were an immigrant. You always told us your story. But until I saw it for myself, until I experienced it myself, I want to do something. I need to do something. And I said, well, it is the call within the church. He says, the church, I don't see that at the parish that we're in. Right? You want to transform lives. We want to transform lives. Let's open up the church to give memorable experiences of transformation. And in doing so, then ask the question, where did you see God in that moment? That was more of a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, no, excellent. Yes, absolutely. We are at 12:56. My only other request of you, Juan, is in your presentation, if you ever have the means of providing it in Spanish, I would be forever indebted. I would come to Chicago. I would wash your car. I would go to your fiesta, you name it, because the reality of this is that this is an English offering in this moment, and it is in itself woefully inadequate. Your prophetic words, your encapsulation of the responsibility that we have in accompanying and making young leaders in our church, it needs to be read by those for whom their first language is Spanish. And if I can ask you of that, you've got car washes and other things, coupons in your back pocket from me.
I'd be happy to. I would also welcome an invitation to, a table there as well. Right?
Yes.
If that's ever, a possibility.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You have a welcome here. We are at 12:57. Again, a profound gratitude, Juan, for giving us the time. This will be recorded. This will be available, and again, let's stay in touch. Thank you for your leadership and your wise words, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.